10 years ago, when I was in the 3rd grade, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder called vitiligo. It is an autoimmune disorder that attacks the pigment of your skin. It was the disease that Michael Jackson had that caused him to bleach his skin. Because I was so very blessed to get it in my head, right here and right here, I would be finding myself every 2 months for what seemed to be days on end, sitting in a salon chair, getting my gray patches covered up, while all of my friends were doing normal 3rd grade things. Because now I am 19 years old and my parents are making me start to pay for some of my own stuff, I did not want to be spending hundreds of dollars getting my hair done professionally, so I decided to take matters into my own hands. With the help of my mom, I have learned how to dye my hair with a box at home. Some people dye their hair for multiple reasons: to get rid of the gray patches or strands, like me, to get revenge on their ex, significant other, or just because they want to feel some sort of change. So my speech today is to demonstrate how to dye your hair at home with just 3 simple steps to get the salon quality looks for a fraction of the price. Just to give a little bit of background on hair dye itself, it started off in the 1500s BC, where the Egyptians used henna to cover up gray strands. It didn't really work that well, but it was the only means that they had at this time. The Greeks and the Romans themselves used plant extracts and combined a little mixture in order to get rid of the gray strands as well. And later they found out that it was too toxic, and because of that they decided to switch to another concoction, I would say, which was made out of fermented leeches. They would basically ferment leeches in a container for 2.5 months and use their guts and make a combined mixture, the best word, out of plant extracts and their guts to create the black hair dye that is known as of right here, to cover up their gray patches on their hair, or gray strands, or anything they wanted. Progressing a little bit into 300 BC in the Roman Empire, all prostitutes were classified as blonde-head. A lot of people would use wigs, but a lot of people needed to dye their hair blonde in order to show that they were a prostitute. This was the biggest thing to distinguish the prostitutes from any other sort of civilian within their community. With this, even thinking that the fermented leeches were bad, they would take ashes and burnt plants and form a concoction to get what is known as the blonde. So from 1500 BC to 300 BC, they have discovered a different color besides black. Progressing into 1907, Eugene Schuler created the first commercial hair dye, sort of something like this, but not as professional, I would say, called Ariel. Now, the reason I decided to include this fact was because hundreds of years later, it has been known as L'Oreal. So the brand is still here, still very popular amongst people who decide to dye their hair at home. And because of that, it is still making a lot of money, still very popular. And in 1950, because the hair dye industry was a very big success, Clairol introduced their own lightning product, their own natural way to make hair, to make highlights, I should say, sorry. Because of that, this was a big thing back then. People were dyeing their hair at home because people did not want to admit that they had gray hair. They did not want to admit that they were changing their appearance. They wanted to cover up their hair and walk out and act like nothing ever happened, because if they did, they would be pretty embarrassed if they had to alter their appearance of any sort of way. So now, in 2017, now that we have the technology that we do, hair dyeing is pretty easy once you get the hang of it, but it is a very tedious process. My first recommendation is to definitely choose the right hair dye for you. After doing some research, after experimenting with it for 13 years, I can tell you that I have had my fair share of horrible moments, good moments, and just completely embarrassing moments to the point where I did not even want to walk out of the house. I recommend finding a hair dye that is at least within 2 shades of your darker or lighter hair color, because if you decide to go anything darker or lighter than that, then it's just gonna either bleach your hair, which it did to mine, make it orange, make it yellow, or make it somewhat of a green color, because it has all been that way for me. If you do it within the 2 shades, you are pretty much guaranteed that it will turn out the way that it is supposed to. as it says on the box right here. I did not know that at first. I just figured, you could put any sort of hair color on it and it would work. It doesn't. The second thing I recommend before you even start this is to put on the dirtiest pair of clothes that you have. I'm telling you, when I say that I have stained multiple shirts, pants, pairs of socks, anything you name it, they have been stained because it is a very messy process. I would throw on the oldest shirt you have, the oldest pair of pants you have, the oldest pair of socks, anything to prevent getting hair dye anywhere on your body, because once it gets on your body, it will not come off for days. After that, once you are dressed for the part, now it's time to set the scene. My personal preference is to get all the towels, all the dirty towels that you have in your house, and throw them everywhere. Throw them on the floor, throw them on your counter, throw them on your wall somehow, some way, prop them against the wall, do anything. Because I am guilty of staining my walls, my floors, my sink, my counters, everything. So once the towels are on the floor, your first step is to take the second solution right here, which is the color gel, but it's in Spanish, so I couldn't really pronounce that. And take it and combine it right into your first step, which is the color cream. So after you do this, very carefully, because I've spilt it multiple times, do this. And once these two are mixed, I let it sit for a second. For girls, I've never really personally dyed a girl's hair, so I had to do a little bit of research on it. It is pretty much common that girls tend to divide their hair up into strands, just to make it easier, just so it's not one big clumpy mess. Just divide it into 4 strands and go from there. Because I am not a girl, I do not know how to demonstrate that. So once it is sitting here, I tend to just mix it up a lot until it gets to the color that it's supposed to. It takes forever to mix it up, so I won't do it for you because I'll just completely bore you. But in the meantime, once this is shaking, it will completely turn to the color that you want to eventually. Because this is a darker color, it will take a longer time for it to get to that dark brown, blackish color that you want. So once the color is the color that you want, I tend to take the cap off, which I will not do because I'm in nicer clothes, and I tend to start right up at the root of my hair. The biggest tip I have for this is to put conditioner right around your forehead, right around where your hair is, just because if you do not, it will stick. You will have the most embarrassing hair dye lines right here, and like I said earlier, it will take days to get off. So once I get the roots right here, which is the hardest part for me, I tend to work my way back. Because I do have gray patches in the most inconvenient spots of my head, it is very hard, so I tend to tip my head a little bit to the side, get as much hair dye as I can on the gray part, and let that sit there for the longest. Just because it is the part of my head that I want to trigger the most, I tend to let the hair dye sit there the most, so it can absorb all of the chemicals as much as possible for as long as possible. After that, if you do somehow get hair dye on your face, which I have, I've got it everywhere, take a paper towel and wet it. I either like to use hand soap or conditioner, anything to just quickly scrub it all off. So I tend to take a towel and just wrap right around my head while the hair dye is still pretty wet, because it does tend to come off. Once it's dried, you're out of luck. So after all of the hair is covered with the hair dye, I tend to go straight back, and my tip is to use a comb. Sometimes you tend to get a little bit more dye in one spot than the other, and then I tend to just take a comb, just brush it right through. After that, you wait about 20-25 minutes, whatever the box tells you. Rinse and condition your hair is the main thing. The box comes with a color treatment right here, a color conditioner. I tend to just use my own conditioner. I think it gives better results. Rinse that again, blow dry your hair, straighten it, whatever you like to do once your hair is dry, and you are pretty much done. Just a little bit of information. 75% of American women today have dyed their hair, somewhat, some way. In 1999, only 2% of men have dyed their hair, and as of right now, it has jumped to 11. Because of, anything, gray patches, geez Louise, anything. I don't know why the statistic is raised the way it was, but because of the new change in technology, everything, I believe that hair dye is a trend that is up and coming and will be something that continues to go on throughout the rest of the years.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't expect it to go that long. That's what I was trying